So we got Doug in L.A.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm on the show.
Yeah, you are, Doug. How are you?
How about that?
Oh, man. That first dude took like half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we thought about that, but it's kind of it was sort of the hearty argument that people say they want from us, so we tried to give our best.
All right. Well, I'd just like to say I am a theist, but I'm not Christian. I'm not of the Abrahamic religions. It's just because, they never really clicked for me. There was a lot of strange stuff in their holy books, especially the Bible. Like, Adam and Eve had 2 children, and they were both boys, but then they have grandchildren out of nowhere. I mean...
Yeah. Well, the apologists have ways of sort of getting around that strange little detail, but...
Nephilim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but,
go ahead.
I mean, it's still... I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't work for me, but basically I wanted to talk about, the Gaia hypothesis and stuff. I'm sure you know what it is.
The Earth as a
living
entity.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming that there's an intelligence behind this as well.
No. It's not quite like that.
I have no problem at all to saying that the Earth is alive in both a literal sense in some areas and in a poetic sense, as a uniform ecosystem. I don't see where there's any value on expanding that to some kind of statement about a religious statement or
spiritual statement.
Well, yeah, except that word's so useless.
Yeah, right, exactly.
What you said none of the Abrahamic religions clicked, which kind of tells me that you were looking for religion based on kind of a visceral feel. So what was it about the Gaia hypothesis that clicked?
I don't know. I mean, it just all made sense. It wasn't like, I mean, to a certain extent, there was, it wasn't all done, like, it's not all 100% factual. Like, there isn't, like, conclusive, like, research about it, but it's all,
I agree.
As the hypothesis goes, it works for now, and it's completely believable.
Why? How does it work if we already know that the Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago from the accretion disk of the sun? I mean, how does that become a living entity that imbues some kind of purposefulness or whatever?
Well, I don't even know if you think that that purposefulness comes into it. I mean, is that even part of the Gaia hypothesis? It's
not really, but yeah, I mean, for me at least, I'm actually a pagan, but I believe. I mean, you guys probably think. I mean, you guys don't believe in anything supernatural anyway.
Let me give you my impressions of where I think that all this is about. What we do as people is we try to understand the world and the universe in our own terms, right? I mean, in terms that are relatable to us. And intelligent design is a more, shall we say, faux intellectual, I think, shall we say, ideologically strident form of that activity. What you're talking about is not, doesn't quite take the same approach, but both of them are ways of attempting to understand the world in vaguely human or explicitly human terms. And when I say human terms, the notion of a living entity, the idea, like I have friends who talk about the universe, meant for me to, have a good day today and stuff like, placing, anthropomorphizing the world and the universe around us, right? Giving it human characteristics simply to make it relatable and simply to make the universe seem like it is a less big, scary, cold, empty, vacuum place in which we're all alone and it's big and scary, right? Which, when you think about it, so I don't know if you remember how far you go back with the cartoons. There was a comic strip in the 1980s with a little character laying there called Bloom County. And little character, and he's sitting there contemplating the whole universe, and by the end of it, he's so mind-blown, and he just sits in a little corner eating a cookie, and it says, "This just makes me want to eat a cookie." The whole vastness of eternity really can be intimidating and frightening and terrifying. And so what we do with things like either these earth religions or the Gaia hypothesis or finding God in a man in a big white beard or in some sort of human face to put on this big universe to make it less lonely and scary and less empty and more human and warmer and something that's there that actually cares about us.
Yeah, it's appealing.
Yeah.
My only concern is whether or not it's true.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I get it, but I mean, have you guys heard the Greek creation myth, perchance?
Probably, although I'm pretty sure there's not just one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the one that I'm familiar with, basically, it goes a little something like this. It's like, in the beginning, there was, just chaos and darkness. It was just a dark void. But, within that thing, like, all that exists now was in there. And over a long lapse of ages, like eons and eons, chaos sort of, came to be, what it is today. But they gave, they sort of gave personalities to all of these different things. Like, the void was called a certain deity, and then eventually when the chaos, subsided, it was Gaia, who was the earth, obviously, and then Uranus, who is, like, the stars or the heavens, which we can now, like, sort of interpret to mean, like, space or, like, whatever's above it and, stuff like that. And it's sort of, I mean, if you take away all of the deities and stuff, it's very similar to what, science thinks about how, the earth was formed.
No, it's really not.
Well, I mean, superficially at best, right?
I mean, it's as akin to how science thinks the earth was formed as it is to how a cake was formed, in that at one time there wasn't a cake and at some later time there was a cake. I mean, when you're that vague,
all the dough,
you can make anything.
Sugar came together.
There's a process by which a cake is made and a process by which a planet is made. And saying there was no cake and then somebody threw ingredients together and there was a cake is not an accurate description.
It's not a very good. A recipe book that just said throw all this stuff together would not make a very good cake for you.
Yeah. So I mean,
and that's just it. They didn't have the recipe then, right?
Well,
they came up with these other explanations involving gods and deities and anthropomorphizing, natural phenomena they didn't understand.
We see this all over the place in all kinds of religions, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that creation myths and religious accounts for the unexplained are very similar for three reasons. One, we are all similar, so our brains work kind of the same way. The events are similar or identical. If you're trying to explain, where lightning comes from, you're trying to explain lightning. So the pool of explanations for lightning is somewhat limited by the fact that we're talking about lightning. It's further limited by the fact that we're the ones who are doing the thinking. And we also are incredibly prone to arguing by analogy, comparison, inductive reasoning, in that I've seen this happen this way so many times that it makes sense that when I see something else, it might have come about by, a similar explanation. This is an evolutionary trait that's incredibly beneficial to us as kids, this reliance on authority and the trust that the world tomorrow is going to be pretty much the same as it is today. And we get right answers probably way more often than we get wrong answers. But when it goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong. And when we say that, how come there's so many of these creation myths that all sound kind of similar and some of them got things that are actually kind of right? And it's because we were similar, they're explaining a similar thing, and we're not complete idiots. We weren't even back then. There's night follows day, day follows night type thing. There's this progression, and it's not surprising that somebody would come up with a creation story for the universe that, makes some kind of sense, because perhaps the creation stories for the universe that made absolutely no sense never got written down. Those people were just a little too crazy to have their ideas published.
They were so dumb they just didn't come up with writing. And
we're talking about long before writing. So these are the stories that were passed along in families, at campfires, in societies.
And so they'll change.
And it's because they had appeal. It's because they resonated with so many people in there. It's the reason why Hollywood doesn't produce anything new. It's because the stories that resonate with us keep getting retold in lots of different ways.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can see that. I mean, I can definitely say that that's, pretty likely. But for me, I sort of believe in the supernatural. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, I'm not closed-minded to this whole atheism thing. I'm not, when I left Christianity, I knew I wanted to be religious, but I wasn't like saying, oh, this is like the one true way or anything, and I never vibed with that sort of thing. So all of the things you guys are telling me, I mean, you guys make sense, but...
So let me ask you this. Why? You said when you left Christianity, you knew you wanted to be religious. Why?
Because, I mean, you guys are obviously going to say that this is, just me hallucinating, but, I felt like a presence, in my room, and I saw, like, this figure, like this ghostly figure walking through, and I was like, oh, okay, so there must be more out there. And, I mean, obviously that was just a one-time experience. It could have been a bunch of chemicals in my brain making me hallucinate. I mean, it could be.
Or you might have seen something. There could be 1,000 explanations. My question is, what is it about the proposed religious explanations that make you think that of all the possible explanations, that's the one that's most probable?
I mean, it's just that since I've had a supernatural, or what I believe to be a supernatural experience, it opens the door to all of these things. And, Gaia especially, who I believe in as like sort of a literal being through the extension of the planet, it's so universal. Like, there hasn't been really a single, civilization on Earth that doesn't believe in, like, an Earth deity or something. And you guys have already covered that, like, oh, this is just, like, relatable. They're anthropomorphizing, natural things. And, that's fine. But, I mean, I don't know. That's just the way I see it.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. I mean, because that is pretty much what we think you're doing, is that you're finding a way to put a human face on the world and the universe. And
there's a difference in how certain people approach reality. And some of us are far more concerned with getting to the truth of things, of believing only things that we have really good reason to think are true, and rejecting as unproven those things which have not reached that level. And obviously, I fit into that category. So if I were to have an experience that someone else might write off as supernatural, I'm not going to immediately say, whoops, I was wrong, there's something supernatural. I now think that that's the most plausible explanation. But I'm also not going to say, clearly that wasn't supernatural, I must have eaten something that gave me hallucination, or I'm not going to write off this possibility. I'm going to say, here's something that I don't have a good explanation for. Let me see if I can figure out what it is. And until I find an explanation, I'm damn sure not going to accept one. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to accept some scientific explanation or some supernatural explanation until it's supported by evidence.
Yeah.
And that's I guess
the trick is
how much you want to go on your gut.
Being willing to resist this one feels good explanation.
Yeah, this one keeps me from being too confused and asking more questions.
Yeah. So it's avoiding the comforting explanation, regardless of whether or not it's true, simply because, well, that sounds good, and I'll go on and not have to think about this anymore. So, not to say that that's what you're doing, but a lot of people do that, and we just encourage you to keep thinking.
But anyway, Doug, I appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just say one more thing? All right. Yeah. I mean, I get it, but I mean, one thing, and I'll admit, I'll probably be like the first person on this show to ever admit it, but back when I was a Christian, not only did things not really make sense to me, but, like, I mean, obviously everybody knows the Christian scare tactic of the devil. I've been pushed, I've been, forced to believe all of that stuff since I was born, really. And I mean, I realized one day that the only reason I was still in Christianity was because I was scared that if I wasn't, I'd go to hell, I'd burn forever. And, I never saw the devil. I mean, sometimes I didn't go to church, nothing happened. Sometimes I was in church and I'd, like, goof off and do some stuff wrong. I mean, and one time I actually, thought, oh, God doesn't exist, and I didn't get, struck by lightning, and I was amazing. And I realized that, I just stuck with it because, it made me feel safe thinking, oh, this, guy in a red bodysuit isn't going to come and, like, kill me. And, yeah.
It got its hooks into you, and that's what it does, so.
Yeah, and see, well, anyway, I'll let you go with that, Doug. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
One of the things that's different, when we get different callers, especially when we get riled up, it's people who are asserting a position as not just this is what I believe, but this is what I believe is actually true, and I have good reason for it. there's a different discussion that takes place with those people. And then there are the people who are, this is absolutely true, hellfire and brimstone, and there's a different type of discussion that takes place with those. And then there are people like Doug who have some belief, maybe they're not completely sure why, but they're not pushing it on anybody. They're not asserting that they're necessarily right and somebody else is wrong. And there's a different discussion that takes place with those people. And I'm in favor of all those discussions. I will ridicule ridiculous ideas, and I will not beat up on people who, are still questioning and aren't running around
working it out,
asserting absolute,
and not running around in weird robes.
Yeah.
And
the other thing is that I
people
highly
up.
doubt that Doug would ever, be advocating the teaching of Gaia hypothesis in public schools.
As an alternative theory.
But I might be wrong,
That-
Doug. If I pegged you wrong, you'd call back and correct me.